Hello, my friends. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and welcome back to another episode of Relaxing Reviews. This is part 2 of my review of the Mountain Everest Max mechanical keyboard. I had to split it into 2 pieces because this keyboard really does live up to its name. It is a maximalist approach to a keyboard, and it packs in an outrageous number of features, from a modular numpad and a modular media dock to display keys that are kind of like what you might get on an Elgato Stream Deck, hot swap sockets, edge lighting, RGB backlighting, more features than you can shake a stick at. And in part 1 of this review, which you can check out up here, you can click through there, or you can click through down in the video description as well. In part 1, I took a look at the packaging. We unboxed the keyboard, gave it a very thorough inspection, looked at the keycaps and the construction and the materials. And of course, we looked at all those modular accessories like the numpad and the media dock, the wrist rest, and all the other goodies that came with this keyboard. There was a lot. So I strongly encourage you to go check out part 1 if you haven't seen it already. Here today in part 2, we're going to be plugging in the keyboard, and I'm going to be showing you all of its features. It's, keyboard shortcuts and things. Its software, of course, and all its different software configurability options, the RGB backlighting and edge lighting, and then I'll be taking it for a typing test so that you can see and hear it in action. And I'm spoiling you today because there's not only one typing test, but 2 typing tests. One with the stock keycaps and another typing test with some higher quality, thicker PBT plastic keycaps to see how that affects the typing feel and the typing sound. Once that's all done, we'll come back together here face to face. I'll give you the pros and the cons as I see them for this keyboard before finally delivering my verdict, my final verdict on the Mountain Everest Max. And I'd like to remind you that, of course, if you want to skip through and look at particular sections of this video, there are links, timestamps down in the video description, and the handy chapters feature in the play bar so that you can easily find your way through this video, because again, there's a lot of different pieces and parts here to look at and talk about. This keyboard really does give you pretty much everything you could want, unless you want wireless. It doesn't do that. Or if you want it to be under $270, because it doesn't do that either. This keyboard does retail for $270 US, which might provide a bit of sticker shock for some buyers, but it's got a lot of features. So the question we're really trying to answer here today is it good value? You know what I do know is good value, however? Yeah, you know. It's this t-shirt from this video's sponsor, Into the AM. Into the AM are purveyors of high quality, elevated, everyday apparel, like this super rad t-shirt that I'm wearing right here. This is one of the more recent ones that they sent me to check out, and I think it might be my favorite design of all. It gets a lot of attention. I've received more compliments for this shirt than maybe any of the other ones that I've worn before, and that's saying something. Someone complimented me today on this t-shirt, and it's really not hard to see why. Look at how freaking eye-catching and colorful this t-shirt is. I love the vibes, the space jellies with all the colors, but there's all kinds of different designs exclusively licensed graphic designs available on Into the AM's website. You can go check them out with the link in the video description. And I'm sure that you'll be able to find some high quality, comfortable, easy to care for, eye-catching graphic tees that you will love, because they've sent me a bunch and I pretty much love them all. I'm certain that you will find something there for you. And not only do they have rad t-shirts, but they have all kinds of other stuff as well, like underwear, like joggers, like tank tops and hoodies. It's all there. So please click through on that link down in the video description and save yourself 10% on your purchases on Into the AM's website, whether it's signing up for the Tea Club, which is $15 a month for a exclusive t-shirt every month, or whether you're buying a graphic t-shirt bundle, $60 for 3 awesome graphic tees of your choice. Whatever it is, you get 10% off by using that link in the video description. So click on through, check it out, get yourself some fresh tees like this one right here. And a big thank you to Into the AM for sponsoring today's video. All right, my friends, that said, let's get on with this because we've got a lot of ground to cover today. Let's take a closer look at the Mountain Everest Max. Okay, so here we have the Mountain Everest Max all plugged in and illuminated. This is what you'll see when you plug it in out of the box, except for the fact that the rainbow scrolling effect is way faster out of the box. It is alarmingly fast. So I just slowed it right down here. Let's start off by talking about the wrist rest, actually. I've been using this keyboard for about a week and a half, I guess, at the time of recording here. And I'm liking the wrist rest. It's good. It's nicely padded, but it's also got a relatively firm feel to it underneath that sort of top layer of padding. My only gripes about it are it does pick up finger oils quite easily, so I wiped this down before I started here, but you might still be able to see just kind of clouding on that surface maybe where it's gotten a bit oily. It doesn't look too bad right now, but it does get pretty mucky looking pretty quick. And the other thing is that it kind of bows in the center here. I don't know if you can see that, but it kind of bows down. Now, I'm not really putting that much pressure on that part of it normally, but you see it's got these feet on the bottom that are horizontal on the sides, but, or I should say vertical, whatever. Yeah, vertical, I guess, on the sides, but horizontal in the middle. So this area is left unsupported, and I think that's what results in this bowing. It's on a flat surface right now. It doesn't really do that at the sides, you can see. It's only in the middle. So I think they can improve it by just taking out a vertical one in the middle like that, or another horizontal if they want that wider support there. Other than that, I think it's great, and I love how easily it detaches and attaches. Very straightforward. Okay, and it makes great noises, great sounds. I love those sounds. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the keyboard shortcuts. Now, this is a full-size keyboard, so there's actually not a lot of keyboard shortcuts to talk about, but let's bring out the quick start guide here just to take a look and see. So the first set of shortcuts we have are the profiles. We have 5 onboard profiles with this keyboard, accessed by function and then the number keys 1 through 5. Very simple and straightforward. And it's awesome that it has 5 onboard profiles. That should be plenty enough for anyone. We've also got some basic backlight controls. We can cycle through the backlight types, settings with function left and right, and brightness with up and down. Sadly, there is no control for backlight speed in hardware here, but you can control that with the software, which we'll of course be looking at shortly. But let's just quickly go and show the different backlight modes. So I'll do brightness first, I guess. So it's maximum brightness right now. And it's got 3 steps of brightness. You notice that the backlight brightness also controls the brightness of the media dock dial and the brightness of the display keys over here on the right hand side. So we have off, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess if you count off, we've got 4 levels in total plus off. So that's not so bad. I will say that the display keys, as you can probably tell, are way brighter than the rest of the RGB backlighting, even when the rest of the backlighting is at maximum brightness. It's not the brightest board I've ever encountered in terms of the backlighting. It gets the job done, but I do wish that the display keys brightness was balanced a little better with the backlighting, because me trying to set up this shot, I could not get, sufficient exposure, or there's no exposure level where you can see both the backlight effectively without blowing out the display keys. But when it comes time to look at the display keys themselves, I will adjust the exposure so you can see them a little bit better. Anyway, so that's the brightness control. The backlight settings are controlled with function left and right. So let's just see what there is here. So there's solid color, and it may have defaulted to solid color when I first plugged it in. I actually don't remember. So that's sort of the first one, and actually it's interesting. Normally you cycle through keyboard backlight settings on kind of a cyclical thing where you just loop through and keep going, but this one is like linear. You start at the beginning and then you step through them. So this is effect number 1, just a solid color. As far as I can tell, there's no way to change that color in hardware. You have to use the software. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Let me just double check that that is the case, but I think it is. Yeah, the backlight controls. I don't think there's any way to adjust that color without the software. So we have solid. We have a ripple effect. We have a spinning effect, this is what I meant by they're really fast by default. I haven't turned the speed on this one down, so it's just whipping around there. I don't know anybody who would want something so crazy on their keyboard. It's a nuts default speed. This is a breathing mode. Look at how fast it cycles through the colors. It's so quick. It's almost comical, actually. It's like a breathing mode cycling through. If this was a breathing creature, it would be hyperventilating. We've got a reactive mode, which is doing things on my screen, which I did not intend, but anyway, you can see as we press buttons, they light up. We've got some kind of raindrops mode, I guess. Not quite sure what they call that, but we'll see what they call them when we get to the software shortly. And Another solid color mode, I guess. Honestly, not sure. That appears to be that. Oh, wait, hold on a second, I'm a fool. I was holding down the wrong button. Okay, not function, I was holding down the win key. So this is like a sparkling stars kind of effect. And that's just off. I'm not sure what this one is. Looks like it maybe should be reactive, but nothing's happening. We'll see when we get to the software. So let's just go back through to the gentle wave. This is my favorite of the lot. No direction control either in hardware, and I actually don't think there is any in the software either, although I could be mistaken about that. We'll take a peek in a second. So, any other keyboard shortcuts that we need to know about here? There are media controls, keyboard shortcut media controls, which are accessible from function and the nav cluster over here. That is if you chose to not have the dedicated media dock. You still have media shortcuts, that's nice. You can enable the Windows key lock with function pause, and you can reset everything with function R held down for 5 seconds. So that's all there is to say about the keyboard shortcuts on here. Again, it's a full-size keyboard, so there's not really much of a secondary function layer. Overall, though, I think that it gives you access to everything you need, especially if you've got this little media dock attached here. So, in terms of the backlighting and the edge lighting, which does exist here, you can see it on my hand here, back here. There is edge lighting. If we take off this, you can see it up here too. We'll look at that a little bit more in depth when we get to the software, I think, because that's the only way to configure the edge lighting is in software. But let's talk about the media dock really briefly here, or not so briefly, as the case may be, I guess. We have 5 dedicated media keys, well, really 4, because this one here, the rightmost, works with the dial here. So we've got a little cluster of indicator lights on the left for caps lock and num lock and scroll lock and all that good stuff. Then we have a back media button, forward, play pause, and a mute. Mute and unmute, mute toggle, I guess. They all work great, at least with Spotify, which I tried them with. They all work just fine. So that's good. This final button here works with the dial with the embedded screen. Now this thing is pretty cool, and there's a lot of functionality embedded in this little screen. So let's take a look. I'll give you a little tour through here. So we can press this button, and it brings up this little interface here, which maybe is a little tough for you to see all the way up there. But basically, it's got little icons all the way around that control the functions, or they'll let you select functions. And you control those with the dial by turning the dial here. So let's just start at the farthest left and go all the way around. So the first item on our menu is the clock. So if we want to enter the clock, we again press this little media button here. We have 3 options to display the clock. We have a regular time and date, we have a stopwatch, and a timer that we can set. So let's just choose time and date here, and we press it, and you can see, there we go. It's analog right now, but you actually have the option in software to change it to a digital if you prefer. And this is actually one of my favorites. I just keep it on this a lot. It's kind of handy having a watch or a clock right down there. But to back out, double press. Again, double press. Profile lets you select your different keyboard profiles, of which I only have one saved actually right now. So that's what we've got, profile 1. But if you had others configured in the software or saved on your keyboard here, you could switch through them that way. Lighting, I've not actually explored this much. Oh, here we go. Look, this gives us what our different names here are for the lighting. Static, which we saw, color wave, tornado, they call that one. Breathing, yeah. Reactive, yep. Matrix, they call this one. Okay, I can see what they're getting at. Yeah, it's a little matrixy. Custom, oh, that was that other solid one. So that's configurable in software. Yeti mode. I don't know why they call this Yeti mode, but there it is, or off. Okay, let's go back to our color wave. One thing that I have noticed when turning this knob to select anything on this screen dial, it doesn't always correspond to the little indentations that you feel as you turn it. It's not a smooth dial, it's got little notches in it. And you would expect that when you turn one notch, it would move one, menu option. And it does until you go too fast. If I turn this faster, you'll see that the modes only change at a certain speed, regardless of how fast I turn it. And that's a little bit annoying. I wish that it would continue, stay in lockstep with the notches, but a minor quibble. And it's not just the lighting effects that do that, it's all the modes I've tested. So let's back out here. Volume. There we go. So this is correct. My volume is currently at 50%. And it controls system volume. Oh, that was weird. I don't know why it suddenly dropped down like that. But it controls it in 2.2% increments. And seems to work pretty well. So no problems there. We'll back out. Keyboard brightness. Those are the 4 steps that we saw before. Keep it at 100%. PC info. Now, this one's interesting. This shows us hardware usage. This is the CPU monitor. It always seems to show 0%, and I'm not sure why. I don't think it's reading my hardware properly. Don't know what the deal with that is. The GPU did seem to work to some degree, though, the GPU usage. Although I highly doubt it's at 14% right now, just idling on my desktop. So I'm not sure that that's reading properly either. Hard disk, Wi-Fi. So there's some Wi-Fi action happening. RAM usage, I guess, RAM contents, how full it is. And back to CPU. So there's a handful of basic monitoring readouts there, but I'm honestly not sure where it's getting that info from. I assume just from Task Manager, like the performance Task Manager in Windows. But it doesn't seem to correspond quite right. Like if I open the Task Manager, say, with this handy dandy Task Manager button over here, display button, it'll tell me that right now I'm using about 7% of my CPU. Yeah, it's sitting at 7%. GPU is sitting at 1%. So this 14% readout seems to be incorrect. Hard drive activity is at 0, so that's fine. Wi-Fi is all over the place. It says it's in megabytes per second. I'm not sure if that's right or not. Actually, my Wi-Fi is active right now, so Could be. And the RAM at 14% is accurate, according to the performance monitor in Windows here. So it's a little buggy. It doesn't seem to be working quite right. But maybe I'll have better luck. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure where it's drawing its performance stats from. Back out of that. We have an APM monitor here. This is new to me. I've not actually tried this, but presumably it's some kind of running average of your inputs on the keyboard. So if I were to open, say, Notepad here, and just APM jumps way up. Now, presumably it does this on the keyboard itself. It's not reading something from Windows. It's just measuring its own, inputs. So that's probably pretty accurate. I don't really have a better, well, I guess I could compare it to a software APM measurement, but and it's slowly coming down, obviously, because we're not inputting anymore. But yeah, if you want to know your actions per minute to some reasonable degree of accuracy, presumably, you have that. And custom, not sure what this is. Custom mode, interesting. Now, I betcha, okay, there's a custom mode that allows you to rebind the media keys here. And I wonder if maybe, I think you might have to be in custom mode to get those secondary binds on the media keys. I think that might be what this is. And that's that. So there's a decent amount of functionality built in there, some very thoughtful stuff. Some of it works better than others, but I think it's a pretty cool little addition. And after a certain amount of time, it just times out to that mountain screensaver with the logo. If you want it to, you can also turn off that functionality in the software. So, all right, what else? Let's move our way across the keyboard here. Let's take a quick look at these screen keys. So I know you can't really see what's going on here right now, but it comes with a set of default icons. You can swap them out. Maybe what makes sense, maybe what we should do, you guys, is go to the software, because that's really where you configure these screen keys. And then you can get a better idea for what's going on. That probably makes more sense. Let's do that. Let's pop open the software here. Okay, this is Mountain's Basecamp software, is what they call this. And it's very easy to download from their site. It supports a bunch of different languages in the setup, and it installs nice and easily. And when you run it, you are greeted with this honestly fairly clean, reserved, professionally designed looking interface. This is a very different experience than what I'm used to with keyboard software, and so far it seems like Mountain's a cut above the usual kind of janky software that that you often get with especially keyboards out of China. So from this main page, you can click Customize to customize the Everest, but let's just go to some higher level stuff here. We do have a settings screen for the software itself. It gives you the version. You can automatically check for updates. I don't think there are any because I did that quite recently. You have a variety of software settings, many of which you would expect to see. Start on boot or not, start minimized, minimize to system tray when you minimize it. They do not default to data logging on, but you can turn it on if you like. Automatic updates, beta releases, if you want, you can opt in for. This is kind of a neat one. They do have a Razer Chroma RGB sync, which presumably lets you synchronize your keyboard with your other Razer Chroma enabled peripherals. And then this one, OBS Studio support. Now this is pretty cool. It uses the WebSocket functionality in OBS Studio to let you control a whole bunch of OBS functions with your screen keys over here. And in theory, that's really neat. However, I use Streamlabs OBS, which is a variant of OBS, basically. And I was not able to get this functionality working with Streamlabs OBS. Now, I think that's because the WebSocket plugin for OBS doesn't work with Streamlabs, although I do think there is a way to expose that functionality through the remote control functionality in Streamlabs OBS, but I wasn't able to figure it out. So I wasn't able to configure my OBS commands in that way. However, you can bind these screen keys to just keyboard shortcut or keyboard combinations, like key press combos or macros. So if you have shortcuts set up in your streaming software like OBS or Streamlabs OBS, then you can just have these screen keys trigger those shortcuts, and that does effectively the same thing as this direct WebSocket linkage, as far as I can tell. You know, whether you want to switch scenes or mute or unmute or whatever. So, but there's probably some functionality that's accessible through this OBS Studio linkage that maybe isn't accessible through simple shortcuts alone. I'm not sure. Anyway, just bear in mind that this requires OBS Studio, it seems. It says here, please enter the port and password, which can be found in OBS Studios. Yeah. So, should be as simple as entering the server port and password that you configure in OBS Studio, but I wasn't able to establish the connection when I tried it through Streamlabs. So anyway, in theory though, that's a neat feature. Language support, we've got English, German, French, Spanish. So that's, I guess, what's officially supported with the software itself. We've got some support links over here, including the manual and a bunch of social links for Mountain. So that's pretty straightforward. So if we go back here, here's some other sort of media links and things. We can click customize though, and that's where the meat of all this exists. Up at the top here, we have profiles. I just have default profile enabled right now. You can create new profiles. You can import, duplicate, export, all these kinds of good things. Up to 5, as we saw in the hardware settings here, and they correspond to those keyboard shortcuts. We've got lighting, where it animates our lighting effect, which is kind of nice. You can see those effects that we've already gone through are available over here, as well as a custom option where you can color individual keys. So if I wanted to color, I don't know, the E key or the WASD, let's say, in this very brilliant blue color, just click them. And look at that. Those keys are blue as we click them. One thing that is a little annoying is I don't think there's any way to paint a whole chunk of keys. Well, let's see. No, it only does the first one that you click on. So, and each time you click it, it's got this little waiting thing. So if you want to do a whole bunch of them, it's a little time consuming. You have to wait for it to send that change to the keyboard each time. And that's too bad. for all the lighting settings, you have this sync across profiles option, which presumably does what it says. It changes it for all profiles. Yeah, it says it right there. One thing I do appreciate a lot about this software is it's got all these little tooltips around, which are nice to see. Let's reset these custom settings. But for each of these options, you do have a few other controls here. So for like the wave, for example, you have a single color option, dual color, or rainbow, which is what I've got it set to right now. You can control the speed. I've got it set to the lowest. That's the highest. I told you it was ridiculous. Very fast. Brightness, as one might expect. Oh, and you can control direction as well. I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember if that was an option, but you can, so that's great. Sync across devices. Interesting. I wonder if you have like another mountain device plugged in. Don't know what that would be. Maybe they have mice. I'm not sure. Perhaps this then synchronizes the effects with your other mountain devices that use the Basecamp software. It's kind of neat if that is, in fact, what that does. But the other thing you might notice here for lighting is we can control our screen keys, and under custom, we can control our edge light LEDs. Now, this isn't really something we've looked at much, but maybe we'll take this opportunity to do so. So the edge lighting on the Everest here is a little hard to see, I find, because here, let's wonder how the software is going to handle having the keypad unplugged in action, like hot unplugged. Well, it's unplugged. Oh, and look at it disappeared from the software. It took a moment, but it did figure it out. But let's just look at the edge lighting here. So the construction of this keyboard is two aluminum plates with sort of this LED light strip sandwich going on, and then the ABS plastic on the bottom. But this is what we're controlling here. So if we wanted to change those colors, we can do so just like as we controlled the individual key backlights by clicking like this. Let's say we want one here. I don't know, we want alternating colors. And you can see it's reflected on here. Maybe that's not coming through on the camera super well, but let's make it maybe a more obvious difference here. Presumably you can see that. It's pretty apparent in person here, but this might be an exposure thing. I'm not quite sure. Color balance. Anyway, that control seems to work pretty well. But you notice we only seem to have color control in custom mode here. If we go to color wave, for example, that color wave synchronizes with what's happening on the top of the keyboard. But we don't have any custom control over it in any of these other lighting modes, only under the custom mode, which I suppose makes sense. That's fair enough. It is a 360-degree edge light, as you might be able to see here. And it does also extend to the numpad. If I got it plugged in, it's hard for me to lift this up and show you with the numpad plugged in, so I'm not going to do that. But suffice it to say that the edge lighting works well and is configurable, but what I was going to say about the edge light is that because it's kind of this LED diffuser strip is recessed a little bit back from the edge of these aluminum plates. Maybe you can see here. because it's recessed a little bit, there, that's sort of maybe the best way to see. It doesn't actually cast light out onto your desk surface, unlike other edge-lit boards like the drop control or shift, for example, where the LED diffuser strip is flush with the edge of the case. So it's actually a fairly subtle effect on the Everest. Now, maybe you prefer that, I don't know, but I do kind of like, with my edge lighting, to get the dancing lights on the desk, but that is not something we get here, unfortunately. Alright, so let's plug this numpad back in. Nice and easy like that. It's immediately recognized into the software. Boom. Suddenly it appears. That's awesome. That's rad. Okay, let's make sure we're nicely centered here again. Yeah, let's bring back that wrist rest. Why not? It's nice. It's nice. Okay, so I think the last thing that I have here to show you is, well, not quite the last thing, but one of the last things here is the screen keys. So let's go to key binding, because that's where we control those. So, let's go back to lighting here. Let's put it back on the color wave, because I like that one. Okay, back here in key binding land, we have all the basic stuff you'd expect. So you can click on a key. You can rebind it across a whole wide range of functions. The default function, you can disable it if you want. It appears in red when it's disabled. You have a handy little legend here. OS commands such as these sorts of things: web browser launch, shutdown, hibernate, task manager, run program. So you can click browse and choose an executable for that keystroke to launch if you wanted. Macros, which we have to configure in the macro section. We'll take a quick look at that, but that ought to be pretty straightforward. Media functions, your basic stuff: next track, previous track, play, pause, all that stuff. Keyboard shortcuts. So this allows you to use combinations of keys: Control, Alt, Shift, Window, and a keystroke. So, for example, as you'll see in a moment, we can configure the screen keys to use a Streamlabs OBS shortcut. Like, I use Control M to mute my microphone in Streamlabs OBS. So we can set this to Control and M, and then, well, in this case, Q would then mute and unmute my microphone in OBS. But I'll show you how we bind that to the screen or display keys here in a second. And mouse settings. We can configure mouse settings, which is kind of nice if you wanted. And finally, those OBS Studio WebSocket functions, which won't work right now because I don't have that configured, but you can bind that to any of the keys, not just the screen keys. So we'll just leave this on default here. Then you can do this all on a per key basis, as one might expect. Even the function key, that's shocking. I wouldn't think they'd let us use that one, because that's kind of key to other functionality on the board. Anyway, just like our lighting, we can do all this across all our profiles if we want. Now let's go to our screen keys here. And they have one extra option here, which is the image configuration. And how am I going to do this? Okay, first of all, you guys, remember how I was a little perplexed by what this cable is intended to do when I did the unboxing. one of you astutely pointed out in the comments that it's probably to allow you to put space between your core portion of the board and the numpad if you want. So let's try that out right now. Let's see if that works. So let's undo the numpad here. Presumably this, yes, will disappear because we cannot configure it without a numpad plugged in. Then I'm going to plug in this end right here, like so. And then I'm going to plug this end in right here, like so. And lo and behold, look at that. Look at that. So that does allow you to use this here numpad sort of more freely floating, I guess. Kind of conceptually a weird thing, but it's nice that they give you the option if you want it. I actually really appreciate that. So what I'm going to do here is hopefully just turn down the exposure way down. There you go. Now you can actually see those keys. And holding it closer here, hopefully you can actually make out the icons on them. I'm realizing that one unfortunate side effect of me increasing the shutter speed like this to adjust the exposure is that the LEDs are probably appearing very flickery to you right now. Try and pick there. That's not maybe as bad. But I should point out, as I always do, that that flicker not visible in person. The animations, colors, gradients all look nice and smooth in person. So it's just an artifact of the shutter speed of the camera and the frequency of the LEDs, not visible to the naked eye. So what I'm going to do is hold this here like this so you can see it. And then I'm going to go into the software here and we're going to configure the image. So this is one of the default images. If we press the edit here, we've got a handy dandy library of default images, some system type things up along the top here, and then also some game and app specific stuff. We've got Dota 2, Discord, League, Facebook, Firefox, a whole bunch of stuff. This is not changing the functionality. This is just changing the icon. Here's Steam, there's OBS, YouTube. You can literally switch it to whatever you want, including custom images. Look at this one up here, you guys. This is just my channel logo. I just pointed it at the PNG file. It figured it out. So we click it there, we click done, and it takes a moment to upload it to the board, but there we go. Look at that. It's changed in software and it's changed in hardware here. So the display keys are really that easy. You can configure each one with an image of your choice. It clearly works with PNGs. It probably works with JPEGs, I would guess, as well, although I haven't tested it. But certainly with PNGs anyway. But let's say we wanted this to become my mute key. Like I was saying, we can pick that mute icon. And then, like I was explaining earlier, we can configure this to be a keyboard shortcut. Let's say we wanted Control and M. And it's just that easy. Now, when I press this key, it executes the Control M keyboard shortcut, which for me is the mute, unmute toggle in Streamlabs OBS. And I've tested it and it works just great. So, but of course, you have the whole suite of options that we do under the normal keys here, including OS commands, opening programs, running macros, emulating mouse inputs, all that good stuff. So these stream keys or pardon me, screen keys, display keys, I think they call them, are pretty awesome. They seem quite versatile. They appear to work quite well and easily configurable in the software here. So that's great. So let's just return this shutter speed to where it was so that you can see everything else better. Unfortunately, the display keys disappear into blown out highlights, but if I really wanted to, I guess I could have recorded this in like some kind of higher dynamic range, like S-log, whatever video mode, but I'm not that professional. Okay, so there is the keyboard together again. There's just a couple of other functions in the software here we should take a look at. We've got a basic macro recorder here. I can name this, I don't know, whatever, test. There we go. We can choose to record mouse and keyboard or just one or the other. You can input custom delays. You can choose to do no delay if you want, or the delay that you actually, have when you record it. Otherwise, looks like pretty straightforward there. Does what you expect it to do. Then you can come in here. Can we edit these individual delays after the fact? Let's see. Maybe not. No, looks like we can't. You can move this up or down, but I don't think we can edit the delay after the fact. So that's kind of too bad. But you can delete individual steps if you want. And it looks pretty robust. So, great. Awesome. Let's turf test because we're not going to use that. And then the display dialog. So this corresponds to the display dial on the dedicated media dock. You can enable or disable individual menu options if you don't want them all on there. Custom mode, it says here, custom mode needs to be active for the media dock binded keys to work with alternative functions. So yeah, presumably if you bind those keys here, which you can do in the key binding section, then you have to enable custom mode for those functions to override the default functions. Here's that clock type toggle I was mentioning. You can choose if the screensaver comes on or not, how many seconds it takes. You can even, I believe, yeah, you can edit the screensaver image. So if I wanted, I could change it to, once it finishes uploading that image, which is taking a little longer than it did for the display keys. Okay, this is kind of slow, not gonna lie, which is too bad, but almost there. So close. 97, 99, 99. Hey, there we go. Check that out, guys. Now, for the screensaver, I've got my very own ASMR Nerd logo on the keyboard, and that's pretty cool. You can also have the display turn off entirely after a set amount of time, and you can select a custom menu color if you wanted to do that, which is great. And then you can reset it to its defaults. So that appears to be everything there, but pretty robust, honestly. There's a lot of options there, which is nice. And lastly, this setting menu is specific to the keyboard rather than the software, and gives us a variety of other more granular specific options, disabling various key combinations changing the layout, which is nice, factory reset, and enabling indicator LEDs for presumably lock key functions. If you have this dock removed, maybe things like blinking caps lock, I would guess. So, and that, my friends, is the software situation. Honestly, I'm really impressed with this Basecamp software. It all seems to work exactly as advertised. The UI is nice and clean, easy to read, intuitive, and full of tooltips, which are nice and helpful. This is, as far as I can tell, setting a gold standard for how keyboard software should be designed and how it should operate. So, especially considering we've got all these extra features on here, like a media dock and the display keys that your average keyboard doesn't have, and yet it accommodates them in a clean, functional way. So, bravo to Mountain for some really good, functional, intuitive keyboard software with Basecamp. Okay, all right. We've looked at a lot here, a lot of features and functions, but we're not done yet. We got to take this thing for a typing test. So even this is going to be a little extra, a little more involved. The first thing I'm going to do is we're going to type on the stock configuration with the stock keycaps and the Cherry MX Brown switches and all that. But you know, I've been kind of complaining about the quality of these keycaps a little bit, and I would really like to hear it with some higher quality caps on it, as I believe some of you would as well, because a few of you requested that in part 1 when I talked about these keycaps. So I'm going to then swap on another set of caps, which are made of a nice thicker PBT material. And if you want to see those keycaps in more detail, it's a really fun set. It's supposed to look kind of like GMK Laser. It's basically a GMK Laser knockoff. But if you want to see that in detail, I think I'll probably make that a separate little bonus video that I might upload a few days after this review. So you can keep an eye out for that. You know, looking at those in detail and the whole swapping them out. But in this video, I'm going to do the typing test on the stock caps, and then I'll do a second typing test on those thicker PBT plastic keycaps. And I'm really curious to hear if it does improve the typing sound and if it improves the typing feel of this board. And then after all of that, we will come back together face to face, where I will give you my overall impressions of using the board, and then we'll run down the pros and cons, and I'll give you my final verdict. Whew. A lot of ground to cover here, even in separating it into 2 parts. All right, but hey, let's get on with the typing test. right, so we've had a chance to see and hear the Everest Max in action, and I've used it for about 2 weeks now as my daily driver for typing up my dissertation and for editing videos and for gaming and streaming and everything in between. So I've formed some opinions on it. The first thing is that modular design. Having that numpad that can be removed or put on either side is really wonderful, and it's actually kind of made me love the numpad again. I use a lot of smaller form factor keyboards that do away with the numpad in the name of compactness, and that's all well and good. They're a lot of fun. They're very space efficient. They're quite ergonomic, but having that detachable numpad is really the best of both worlds. When you want to save space on your desk surface, you just remove it. When you want to enter a bunch of numbers or use those display keys, you just put it back on the side that you want, and it's easy to take off and put back on. So I really do appreciate that modularity, and I really do hope that more keyboards adopt this modularity in future. I'm not crazy about the way it connects. I find it to be just a little weak, and I wish that there was a stronger attachment function, I guess. I wish it held it more rigidly onto the core of the board, but I will say that it does make it very easy to just kind of slide it on, slide it off as it sits on your desk surface. So it's a trade-off. It was a decision, I guess, that Mountain made. It's very easy to take it on and off, but it just doesn't feel very firm when it is attached. The media dock, on the other hand, I never took it off, actually. I just left it on the whole time because it doesn't really take up any more space on your desk surface. It's just kind of there on the top of the board. People might argue that don't like it aesthetically or whatever, but I have no problem with it. I think it looks fine. And having those dedicated media keys and that display dial is really nice. The display dial itself, it's a little bit gimmicky. I would say it's less useful than the display keys on the numpad, which are very useful indeed. Having those fully customizable shortcut keys with your own icons on them is fantastic. The display dial, I found myself using it mostly for the clock function on it. I just set it to the analog clock and left it like that, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed having it there, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. Most of the features on it are not especially necessary. It was also fun to set it to my channel logo, and every time I look down at my keyboard, hey, the ASMR nerd, it's me. But, that's maybe just kind of a novelty. It's certainly not a necessity. Overall, the media dock is fine. It's nice to have it. And again, I do appreciate the modularity, even though I basically just left it on there the whole time. A couple of things about it that I would like to see, though. One, I wish that the edging around the dial had some texture to it, or some little, knurling or something, because it's quite slippery and smooth. Not the easiest thing to get a grip on necessarily. I also found that when I shut down my PC or unplugged the keyboard, the media dock wouldn't remember the last thing that I had active on it. So every time I wanted to set it back to that clock, I'd have to go back into the clock. It's a couple of menu layers down, which is not a big deal, but it would be nice if it remembered what I had it set to between power cycles. So that's all the modularity of this thing. I think it's really well considered, well implemented. The typing experience, however, does leave something to be desired. I would say that this is a very average typing experience. It reminds me of typing on a lot of other mainstream boards I've used in past, like my Corsair K70, that kind of thing. Certainly it does feel better than a cheap plastic board. It has a more weight to it. It has just a better typing feel and sound. But it's not up there with truly enthusiast-oriented premium keyboards. And there's no doubt that there are better feeling, better sounding keyboards available for less money than the Everest Max. Something like the Varmillo MA108M, for example. It just blows this out of the water in terms of typing feel and sound, but obviously comes nowhere close to competing in terms of features. So that's worth considering. What's most important to you? I think for most people, the amazing richness of features available with the Everest Max probably outweighs that typing experience. And the Everest Max makes more sense for most people. But if you are a real stickler for typing feel and sound, you're an enthusiast or a purist and you don't want all those other features, there are better options from a pure typing perspective. So that's really what I wanted to say about using this board. Overall, the usage experience was very pleasant. The software continues to be excellent and consistent. I really didn't run into any glitches or bugs with this setup, which is surprising or impressive, I suppose, considering just how many pieces there are to it. Removing and attaching the numpad, for example, was never a problem. It was always detected right away. The only real glitch that I would mention is that the PC stats monitor display on the display dial didn't seem to be reading my PC stats properly, but minor quibble. Otherwise, everything worked great, exactly as it should. So that's my experience using this keyboard. So now that I've given you sort of the general impression of my day-to-day usage, we've had a chance to listen and see this thing in action. Oh, sorry, one more thing I completely forgot. Those two typing tests that you just watched and heard, I wanted to talk about those. The keycaps, the stock keycaps on this board are definitely a weak point. They are quite thin. They feel quite cheap. They do impact the typing sound and feel, and you probably heard that in the typing tests. It's certainly quite noticeable under my fingers. The thicker PBT keycaps that I swapped onto here go a long way to improving the typing experience, but they don't alleviate every issue with the board. There's still quite a bit of ringing, as you may have noticed. And in the first part of this review, I attributed that to probably some resonance in the plate and the structure of the board. I presumed that it was undampened. However, someone in the comments, and I do apologize, I don't remember the name of that individual, but thank you, whoever you are. You know who you are. Thank you for alerting me to this. They said that evidently it does have a dampening foam inside. So I'm not quite sure why we're getting so much ringing. It might just be because of the design of the plate. There's certainly no gasket mounting or anything going on here. The plate that you see on the top of the board is the plate that your switches are banging into. So maybe that's it. Maybe it just resonates that way. I'm honestly not quite sure, but I don't think it's the switches themselves. It doesn't sound like switch pinging. It's a much more resonant kind of ring, like the whole body of the board. So most people probably wouldn't even notice this. It's not offensively loud, but it is there for sure. It is there. and I suspect you did hear it during the typing tests. So, but anyway, the stock keycaps, just really not great. They're fine. They're totally functional, but they just don't feel premium. And I feel like a board at this price point with this feature set really deserves better keycaps. Now, the good news is that Mountain will sell you better keycaps for a $30 premium. I believe it's $30. I don't know what those caps look like. I have not tried them out. I don't know how thick they are, what the legends are, or anything about them is like, but you might consider that option. Alternatively, there's tons of other inexpensive keycap sets out there that will blow the pants off the stock caps on this board. So you might consider that cost when considering the purchase of this board. Consider the additional cost of upgrading to some nicer keycaps, because they do make a difference, an audible difference and a tactile difference as well. Okay, now that's everything. That's everything I wanted to talk about here. So next up, I'm going to run down the pros and the cons of the Mountain Everest Max before giving you my final verdict. Starting with the pros, the stuff that I liked about this keyboard, and there is a lot here, probably more than I've ever had for any product ever, which is largely a function of just how freaking feature rich this thing is. So buckle up, here we go. The first thing that I really appreciate about this board is the thick aluminum top plate. Plates, two of them. There's one on top that covers the entirety of the board, and then there's another one under that that kind of creates that side lighting sandwich with that LED diffuser strip all the way around. That second plate, I'm not sure if it is really a plate or just kind of a border on the exterior. Like, I don't know if it runs all the way through underneath. Either way, whatever system they've got going on there, I think it looks nice. It's got kind of a minimalist industrial brushed metal sort of look, and it confers a great deal of rigidity to the board, so it feels nice and solid. Overall, this board feels pretty well built, especially when you're considering the top perspective, looking down on the top. The bottom, there's a bit more plastic there. We'll talk about that in the cons section, but overall, I really did appreciate the use of aluminum in that top plate sandwich type construction. The second thing that I want to call out is the wrist rest. This thing right here. Might as well bring it out because it sounds really nice. I love the sound of this thing. I'm going to just keep tapping on it. Top marks for a nice sounding wrist rest. Well done, Mountain. But no, overall, it is a really nice feeling rest. It is firm underneath, but it's got a squishy top layer. It's really just right for my preferences. Some people might want something a bit softer. It's not like memory foam or like a gel wrist rest or anything. It's firmer than that, but personally, I really like it. So props on the wrist rest. Something else that I'd like to call out here as a pro, which I don't think I showed you guys testing, but I did test it out, and that's the USB 3.2 Gen 1 hub. It's just a USB Type A port on the top of the keyboard, and it transfers at USB 3 speeds, which is a really nice thing to have. Many keyboards actually forego the USB hub, but I do appreciate that it is present in this board. And just to be clear, USB 3.2 Gen 1 is the same as good old USB 3.0. There's been so many revisions to the naming of USB standard, it's ridiculous. But it basically means that it tops out at a theoretical 5 gigabits per second, which for whatever you're plugging in is probably adequate, certainly for other peripherals or anything like that, or a USB thumb drive, it's gonna be just grand. So props on that. Now, getting into the real meat of what I love about this keyboard, the modular numpad is excellent. As I already described in my usage section, it kind of rekindled my love for numpads. I did try it on both sides of the board, the left and the right. I thought I might prefer it on the left because then you can numpad with your left hand and mouse with your right hand at the same time. But ultimately, I ended up keeping it on the right because my right hand is more accustomed to the locations of the numbers on the numpad. But whatever your preference, whatever your handedness, Mountain has you covered with that removable numpad that's very easy to attach and remove on the fly, and the keyboard has no problem detecting it after like a second. It's smooth, it's functional, it's awesome. And if there's any feature of this board that other manufacturers learn from and copy, it's that removable numpad. I'd love to see that more. Similarly, I did really enjoy that modular media dock. Now, I think it's a bit more gimmicky than the modular numpad, and it's not as essential or useful overall, perhaps. You could have just had those as embedded keys, in the chassis. And I think the display dial is really cool, but again, maybe a little on the gimmicky side, maybe a little less necessary. But overall, I really did enjoy having the choice. And that's what this keyboard's all about, right? It's about giving you options and customizability. So that modular control dock, media dock, is a definite plus. On the same note as the modular media dock and numpad, specifically the display keys on the numpad, I wanted to call out because they're sort of a separate thing yet again from these modular components. And I would love, again, to see more keyboards integrate the concept of display keys as more people are out there streaming. I think having a Stream Deck-like function built into the keyboard is a fantastic value add. They work really well, they look good, they're just convenient. Even people who aren't streaming can find uses for them, I am sure. They are simply customizable macro keys, and the ability to give them your own icons really seals the deal. So big props to Mountain for those. We're not done yet. There's more to talk about. The hot swap sockets are really nice to have. Again, with that theme of modularity, that theme of customizability, I would be dismayed, I suppose, if this keyboard did not have hot swap sockets. So I'm very glad that it does. I honestly have a very hard time recommending keyboards that are not hot swap compatible to people these days. Even people who think they know what switch they want and are never gonna try something else. Having the flexibility to change them out in the future on a whim, or if your tastes change, or just to test something out, whatever. I think that's such a value add, and it's especially valuable on this board because there's actually a real lack of full-size, hot swappable quality keyboards on the market. There's a lot of budget-oriented keyboards that have the hot swappable Outemu style sockets, so they'll only fit the thin pins of the Outemu style switches. But a widely compatible, high quality, full size hot swap keyboard is strangely uncommon in the market. One of the only other ones I can think of is the glorious GMMK, the non-pro version. So not a lot of options if that's what you're looking for. So I'm really glad that Mountain has included the hot swap compatibility in this board. I'm also quite impressed with their stabilizers. Now, stabilizers are hard to get right. It's really easy to have bad stabilizers. Overall, I thought that the stock lube job on these stabilizers was pretty good. They are genuine cherry stabilizers, so they're of good quality, and I found the stabilized keys to sound and feel pretty nice. Now, with a little bit more tuning, you could really make them sing, or not sing, as the case may be. I guess you want them quiet and smooth, don't you? Personally, I like a bit of a softer bottom out on my stabs, so like a Band-Aid mod would be my preference. A little bit more thock than clack, and I'd probably lube them even a little bit heavier to just really make them buttery, get rid of those just occasional clacks and rattles. But overall, pretty decent stabilizer performance on this board. Not up to the levels of, for example, Vermillo. They have just absolutely nailed the art of tweaking their stabs from the factory, but still a good effort from Mountain's part, and a cut above, say, 90% of the keyboards that I review. Okay, we're almost there. Two other things that I really love about this board. Configurable edge lighting. A lot of the keyboards that I've reviewed in past with edge lighting or side lighting don't give you much in the way of configuration options, but Mountain gives you individual per LED control of the edge lighting in their Basecamp software. Awesome to see. And finally, last point, that software, Mountain's Basecamp software, is excellent. It is maybe the best proprietary keyboard configuration software that I have ever used. It was, as far as I could tell, bug-free. The interface was clean and intuitive, and the functionality that it packed in pretty much included everything you might want. So I have nothing to complain about with Mountain's Basecamp software, and I think it is really well implemented. So good job to Mountain for some quality software, finally. How many times have we suffered through janky keyboard software? But Basecamp, it's good. Over here now, in your other ear, and with the cons, the things I didn't like as much about this keyboard. There are a handful of these things, so let's step through them sequentially here. The first is I don't really like the plastic used on the underside of this board. I know. They use the aluminum on the top, and overall the construction feels quality, but I can't help but feel that all that molded plastic on the bottom does cheapen the board a bit, and certainly at this price point, it is easy to find fully aluminum keyboards with aluminum top and bottom case. So I'm a bit disappointed by the use of so much ABS plastic on the bottom half of this keyboard. I do think it just cheapens the overall feel, takes it from feeling just like really premium to just like sort of premium, like mainstream premium, if that makes sense. And it would be really nice if they offered an all aluminum option, although that probably would drive up the price. I do understand that Mountain had to make compromises and cut some corners here and there to pack in the feature set that they have at the price point that they're offering it. Nonetheless, if I could have my dream keyboard, my perfect version of this board, it would have an all aluminum case, top and bottom. Speaking of somewhat low quality feeling components, it comes as no surprise to you that these keycaps are really kind of disappointing. They are made of very thin ABS plastic. The legends are not double shot. They're just a coated ABS. So over time, that coating could chip or wear off with repeated use, and you're left with illegible legends. And I have had keyboards in the past that have used this technique for their keycaps, and where I have started to see wear on those keycaps. Granted, it took many years of daily use, but it did happen eventually. The other thing I don't like about these caps is how much they pick up finger oils. They shine up really easily, and you end up with this kind of grimy looking surface where the keycaps that you use the most have these shined up, greasy looking surfaces. The ones you don't use are a little more matte looking. Overall, just not really there aesthetically, not really pleasing from a functional standpoint either. So I would really love to see Mountain swap out the stock caps on this keyboard. Another thing I want to point out is that while I love the hot swap functionality on this board, it only supports 3-pin switches, plate mount switches. This is, of course, a plate mounted design, so that makes sense to a degree, but would it really kill them to include those extra through holes to accommodate 5-pin PCB mount switches? I'm not quite sure why they wouldn't, other than the fact that I guess it's more expensive to produce a keyboard with more through-hole cutouts maybe. And I suppose it makes routing traces a little trickier because you have to accommodate all those extra holes, but it's going to be in the footprint of the switch anyway, so I'm not convinced that that's the reason why. I've certainly seen 5-pin support on much cheaper keyboards, like the Royal Kluge keyboard I reviewed a while back had 5-pin support on their hot swap board. So I would love to see Mountain implement that 5-pin support in a future iteration of this board, because there's a lot of awesome switches out there that are PCB mount 5-pin in their design. Of course, I will reiterate or remind you, you can just clip those extra pins and those switches will then work fine in this keyboard. But why would you do that if you didn't have to? It'd be nice to not have to do that. So that'd be great to see support for PCB mount 5-pin switches in future. I did spend some time earlier talking about the very average typing sound and feel of this keyboard, so I'm not going to harp on that here, other than to say that I wish it sounded and felt a little better. Specifically, I wish it sounded and felt a little more dampened, even though evidently there is foam dampening in there somewhere. I just can't help but shake the feeling that it just sounds and feels a bit hollow and a bit pingy when you're typing on it. Now, in all fairness, the board that I was daily driving before this was the GMMK Pro, which is heavy as hell aluminum case, big, thick, heavy brass plate, tons of dampening foam, and perhaps most importantly, a gasket mount style plate mount. So that's kind of, approaching the best you get in terms of sound dampening, arguably. Anyway, people argue about that ad nauseum online, but it's definitely a different beast. It is very focused on the typing feel and sound, whereas the Everest Max is kind of focused on a lot of things. It's got a lot of other concerns going on here, so I will cut Mountain a bit of slack in that regard, but I still do wish that I just enjoyed typing on this a little bit more. I never disliked typing on this, but I didn't relish the thought of typing on it in the same way I do with some premium typist-oriented, more purist kind of keyboards, where it's really all about that typing sound and feel. That wasn't the experience I had with this keyboard. Will it be good enough for most people? Oh yeah, for sure. Most people will think this sounds and feels fine, which sounds a little bit like elitist and gatekeepy of me. I don't mean it that way. I mean that for most people, it's totally adequate. And for me, I didn't think about it a lot in usage, but in a one-on-one comparison, there are certainly boards that will feel and sound a lot better. at this price point. So it would be nice if this just was a little more tasty, a little more delicious to use, if that makes sense. And finally, I just want to point out once again that little quibble I had with the display dial, where when you power cycle, it seems to forget what settings you had it set to previously. It's a minor thing, but it would just be nice if it remembered, and so it just booted up to what you had it at previously. It just saves you a few button clicks and having to readjust it each time you restart or power off and power on your PC or unplug the keyboard. Oh my gosh. Here we are, my friends, at the end of this monstrous review. I'm pretty darn sure that if you combined part 1 and 2 of this review, this would easily be the longest relaxing review I have ever done. But it's not without good reason, because Mountain's Everest Max is truly a keyboard that lives up to its name. It tries to do it all, and it offers unprecedented customizability and a crazy huge feature set that easily sets it apart from its competitors. While it does suffer a little bit from that kind of jack of all trades, master of none problem, I would say, in my personal assessment, that the compromises that Mountain has made with this keyboard are reasonable, and all of the Everest Max advertised features are at least executed competently, even if none of them are to the level of what I would call truly excellent. There are certainly better feeling, better sounding, better built keyboards, honestly, at this price point. But none of them hold a candle to the Everest Max's modularity, customizability, or functionality and flexibility. Some people might balk at the $270 asking price for this keyboard, but I honestly think that when you factor in the feature set of this board, which is really unmatched, it's quite unique. You factor in the build quality of this board, which is not exceptional, but solid nonetheless, and you factor in the price of this board, I think that Mountain has actually struck a really good balance here, and it offers quite good value if you need or want all the features that it offers. Now, as I've said, mechanical keyboard enthusiasts or real purists who want a simpler experience might prefer to go with a board that offers a better typing feel, a better typing sound, better quality materials, something like that. But I think for most people, especially most mainstream users looking for a highly customizable, full-size keyboard that pretty much does it all, I think that Mountain's Everest Max is very easy to recommend. I might go so far as to say that it is the best choice. And that, my friends, does truly bring us to the end of this mega-sized, relaxing review. Special thanks to Mountain for sending over the Everest Max that you guys saw here in today's video and in part 1 as well. I really do appreciate them facilitating this review. And if you would like to pick up an Everest Max of your own, you can do that direct from Mountain. There's a link down in the video description, and as I understand it, they ship worldwide. So click on through and check it out. It really is a very special keyboard, and you should certainly consider it. Also, special thanks to this video's sponsor, our friends at Into the AM, they of the awesome graphic t-shirts. Big thanks to them for sponsoring this video, for sending over this t-shirt you see me wearing right now. I appreciate their continued support of the channel. Alright, my friends, I hope that you found these two videos, but especially this part 2 here. I hope you found it informative, and I hope you found it relaxing. And I look very forward to having you back here next time for another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Bye for now, my friends.